2020 is set to be a huge year for single-player games. In fact, some of these titles will arguably be the largest games ever made, both in terms of potential scope as well as potential sales. Of course though, in answer to that, only time will tell. Now, as there's so many single-player games coming out in 2020, in this video I'm going to take a look at a few of what I feel will be the highlights. I fondly remember my experiences with Final Fantasy VII way back in 1997 on the original PlayStation. It was actually my first experience with the series, but it left a lasting impression. The remake then will bring Final Fantasy VII to a whole new generation of gamer, not to mention allowing all those who played it before to revisit this amazing game. Now it seems that 2020 is going to be filled with titles that have a lot to live up to, and Final Fantasy VII is no exception. Weighing in at over 100GB in size, this game is going to be large in a very literal sense. But I will say that whilst I'm certainly keen to get my hands on this PlayStation 4 timed exclusive, I do have a number of reservations. Primarily among these is the removal of turn-based combat, as Square Enix have opted instead for action-based combat, and this is a massive departure from the original version, but it's certainly more in line with the recent iterations of the series, such as Final Fantasy XV. The second potential issue here is that the game will be releasing in episodes. It's still largely unknown how long each episode will be, or precisely how closely they will follow the narrative of the original game. However, Square Enix have been clear and pointed out numerous times that it is a remake and not a step-by-step reconstruction of the original, so it's likely to differ in a number of ways. They've also stated that each episode will effectively be a standalone game. Whatever happens though, expectations are certainly high, and I for one am looking forward to returning to the world of Midgar. If we're to look at games in terms of the literal size of the game world, few single-player focused titles in 2020 will be as large as Flight Simulator. Here, Microsoft and developers Asobo are recreating the entire planet Earth. And unlike all previous flight sims that have come before, which have had to scale back on detail due to limitations of technology, Microsoft are going all out and creating perhaps the most detailed representation of Earth ever put into a game. Using Microsoft's Azure cloud-based technology, combined with their satellite imagery from Bing Maps, in addition to some rather extremely clever coding, the world around the players will be generated in real time as it's streamed in from the game's servers. The result is unprecedented levels of detail, not to mention Microsoft's assurances that everyone in the world will be able to locate their own house. Now, whilst flight sims are traditionally a fairly niche genre followed by a dedicated crowd, it appears that Flight Simulator 2020 has caught the imagination of a far wider audience than is usual for this type of game, and this is totally understandable as the game is aiming to do something that has never been done before. With the release window of 2020, a closed alpha for the game is currently underway, with Microsoft sending out invites to applicants on a regular basis. Doom. Who can forget the entrance this series made into the world of gaming? And just as with the other titles in this video, Doom Eternal certainly has a lot to live up to. As is to be expected, the game appears to be as fast and as frantic as ever, and the combat is suitably gory for the franchise, not to mention the now signature style of music. There's not a lot that can be said about Doom that hasn't been said before, and the truth is that the name of the game will evoke imagery in people's minds that will undoubtedly tell them everything they need to know. For those looking for a fast-paced shooter filled with demonic spawn, it is unlikely that Doom Eternal will fail to deliver. Developers Naughty Dog over the years have proven they are masters of both storytelling and game design. Of course, as with the first game, the real star of The Last of Us 2 is the story. But it's also fair to say that the game does have some of the best character portrayals in the industry. Now, when the 2018 trailers for the title dropped, the gaming media was awash with comments on the nature of the extreme violence on display. One of the reasons this perhaps stood out so much is that the violence was undertaken by the game's main protagonist, Ellie, who in previous games was still a child. She's now grown up and moved on somewhat, but it's clear that she finds herself in a very dark place. As to be expected from a Naughty Dog title before release, much of the story is still under wraps, and it's highly likely that more than a few surprises will be awaiting players when the game finally releases. The gameplay itself looks to have a fantastic mix of stealth and action, which is now a hallmark of the developer. Anticipation is high for this one, and the anxiety-inducing clicking sounds of the infected are likely to once again make a harsh impact. It's impossible to talk about single-player games without also talking about Cyberpunk 2077. Based upon the pen and paper roleplay game of the same name, Cyberpunk 2077 will lead players into a vast technological future. From the same development team as the excellent Witcher 3, this title would already have a lot to live up to, yet with the hype that has built up around this game, it will need to be nothing short of breathtaking. Originally set for an April 2020 release, the title was pushed back to September. Whilst that's a reasonably substantial delay, there's nonetheless plenty of game footage available, as over the past few years, CD Projekt Red have released a number of lengthy videos demonstrating some of what can be expected from the game. To say it looks spectacular is an understatement. Hopefully then, it plays as good as it looks. In terms of gameplay, Cyberpunk 2077 is set in the largest open world the developers have ever created. As a sci-fi title, players can expect to find themselves in a world filled with technology that pervades every facet of life. Augmentations will form a large part of the game as players follow a lengthy narrative-driven arc. Tons of side missions can also be expected. Oh, and of course there's also Keanu Reeves. Half-Life needs no introduction, and after a gap of well over 12 years, a new title in the series is finally being released. Whilst this certainly isn't the title that many were hoping for, this new VR-exclusive game nonetheless took the world by storm when it was announced. Half-Life Alyx then is a prequel to the previous games and will take place exclusively on PC VR platforms. The expectations for this title are so high that many are claiming it is responsible for Valve's own VR headset, the Index, to be in limited retail supply worldwide. Fortunately, the title will be running on Steam VR, meaning that it will work on all compatible headsets such as the Oculus Rift S. Half-Life Alyx then is truly expected to mark a generational leap forward in terms of gaming for the VR platform, and it could be reasonably argued that this is going to be the first AAA game title ever released for virtual reality. The stakes are no doubt high for the game, but Valve are one of the pioneers in modern VR gaming tech, so the game is likely to be in safe hands. For anyone who's experienced the recent release of Boneworks, they will have at least some clue as to what to expect from Half-Life Alyx in terms of interaction. The ability to step inside Half-Life and interact with the world as though it were a real world is likely to be a dream come true for many. Accompanied with some seriously stunning graphics, headcrabs have never been quite so terrifying. The various game worlds out there at times can get pretty dark, and sometimes it's a real treat to be looking forward to something a little brighter. Fortunately, this is where Animal Crossing New Horizons comes in. This will be the first time that the series has appeared on the Nintendo Switch, and if you are a fan of the series, there's certainly a lot to look forward to here. The game traditionally hasn't departed too far from its established formula, however, that is generally a huge part of the game's charm. Situated on a lone island, players will help build a community filled with simple daily activities and pursuits. House ownership, friend making, and little exploration are all things that players can expect to get involved in. The new title, however, does come with a few new changes, one of which is the ability to craft tools from gathered resources. The real pleasure of Animal Crossing, though, has always been building a community, furnishing your house and interacting with the various creature people in your village. It's an unusually charming game that stands out in stark contrast to the rest of the titles in this list. However, that is one of the many reasons that so many people are no doubt looking forward to this one. Hellblade: SENUA'S Sacrifice ranks for me as one of the best games of all time. A truly amazing story told in a way of unusual depth for the medium. Hellblade 2 then is perhaps one of my most anticipated titles in recent times. Unfortunately, it's impossible to say much about Hellblade 2 right now, as the only thing released so far is the announcement trailer. However, Ninja Theory have indicated a 2020 release date, so this is certainly one to watch out for. So that pretty much covers a few of my most anticipated single-player games for 2020. However, that's not to say that this is the full list of single-player games coming. In fact, there are so many games due for release either this year or coming very soon next year that my initial intent was to include as many as possible. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild 2, Beyond Good and Evil 2, Yakuza Like a Dragon, Bravely Default 2, and many more, all games that I could have included, but for a variety of reasons, including the fact that a few of these titles might not even release in 2020, I decided to limit the video to a few of what I feel will be highlights for the year. Do let me know in the comments section below which single player games you are most looking forward to this year. I'd love to hear from you. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.